Do you ever feel you spend too much time, effort and money watering your plants? And if there's a drought or a hosepipe ban, are you really happy to trudge around your garden with great big buckets of water or watering cans just in order to water every night? It's Alexandra here from the Middle-Sized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and I've gone down to RHS Wisley, where water management and water saving is done on a major scale, to talk to water management horticultural consultant Janet Manning about how we can save water and in fact even think in quite a different way about water in our gardens. So Janet, what do you think is the most important thing we need to think about when we're thinking about managing water for our garden?
Well, to be honest, I think it's soil, because the biggest reservoir we have is the soil right under our feet. We all talk about water butts, and water butts are great. You can never have enough water butts. But actually, if you can keep your soil really healthy, then it will capture more water for you. So when there's rain around, more of it will stay in the soil, and then you don't have to carry it around all the time.
Brilliant. So when you're saying in terms of looking after the soil, does that mean mulch?
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you imagine all the little things that live in your soil, right from earthworms and springtails and all the bacteria and the fungi, all of that life needs water as much as your plants do. And those organisms are all breaking down that organic matter, and they are providing the nutrients for your plants as well. So it's a whole life system that needs the water as well. And when they do break that matter down, they produce these very sticky substances, and it's those sticky substances that then hold onto more moisture for you.
How much mulch do we need, and how often should we put it? And is there a particular kind of mulch that should be or shouldn't be on top?
There's lots of reasons for mulching, not just water management, but actually mulch can suppress weeds. It will keep the root zone cooler because you've got like a layer of insulation. So there's lots of different materials you can use. Any homemade compost is great. Straw, dried herbaceous stems that have dried out, if you can chop them up a little bit, even better. Even lawn mowings, if you don't put too much on at once, you can use lawn mowings as a little bit of a mulch. Some people won't like the look of that, but it will very quickly get incorporated into the soil. But the only thing I would say is that if you can use a chunky mulch, so things like pine bark or the cocoa chips that you can find, then it's quite chunky and it's loose and it's big particles, and then the water will drain straight through that and get into the root zone where it needs to be. Whereas if you use something like your homemade compost or even multi-purpose compost, then it's really finely divided, and it's designed to hold moisture. And then all you're doing is holding that moisture on the surface of the soil, and that's where it will dry out. So chunky bits on top, finer bits underneath, and then it works better because then the rain will go straight through the top layer.
And in fact, if your own homemade compost isn't really completely decomposed, would that be the chunky layer?
Absolutely perfect. So what I do at home is I will sieve my homemade compost. There's always a few chunky bits of, bits of twig and leaves that haven't quite broken down. And so the sievings become my mulch because it's partly broken down. It's nice big chunky bits. It's good organic matter. It will carry on breaking down as it's on the surface, but then it means that all the good stuff is underneath holding the moisture for the roots.
And how often?
Well, that really depends. I mean, we're here at Wisley and it's really warm today. And when the temperatures rise, obviously all the respiration rates increase as well. So all the bacteria and everything will be eating that mulch away a lot quicker. And so you'll find that, after a long spell, that actually everything will disappear a little bit quicker. It's entirely up to you how often you mulch. But yeah, if you've got a layer still there, then go with it. And if it's looking a little bit sad and it needs topping up, then more of it. I do think that in the past, some people say, oh, don't mulch in a drought. But I think that's because if you were to mulch using that fine layer of compost, then when you do go watering, all you're doing is holding that moisture at the surface. So save that for like early spring, when you're just about to start planting, plenty of moisture around, temperatures are cooler, that will work fine. But if you've got a top-up mulch in weather like this, when it's really warm, I would go with the easily drained, larger particle stuff, and that will get you through the drier spells better.
So what about water butts or rain barrels?
Yes, rain barrels are great. I mean, I don't think you can have too many. I just tell people that if you can fit them in, then do. And actually rainwater is better for your plants. So in the UK, all the water has to be above pH 6.5 to be supplied to your house. That's to help with plumbing, and so you haven't got acidic water that's going to dissolve plumbing, whereas the rainwater has none of that pH buffering. So the rainwater actually meets the pH that the plants need depending on what soil you've used, and so the roots just work better with rainwater, and it's free.
So taking that, we don't all necessarily have lots of space for lots of rain barrels or water butts. What would your advice be when people are buying and choosing and installing water butts?
Always go for as many as you can fit in. That's clear. But you obviously need a down pipe coming off your roof to be able to connect into. So even if you've got a very small one that you can only fit in there, and if your garden is level, what you can do is use siphons to connect them up. It saves an awful lot of moving water around as well. So you can put another one alongside or even a little distance away, and as long as you've got a tube that goes to the bottom of both water butts, and you completely fill it with water to start with, and you can do that either with, you perhaps put your thumb over the end, put the tube into one and stick it into the other one, and then that will siphon the water into the other water butt, and you can move water around from both butts without, it just works automatically. You don't need to move it or change it at all. You can just leave that tube in place, and those two water butts will work as if they're one.
Are there any common mistakes that people make when they're putting their water barrels in?
Oh yes, definitely. The one that I've done, and I'm sure many people have done, is that you put up a nice new rain barrel while the sun's shining, and you forget to check whether you've shut the tap, because it's all dry and it's empty, and you've got no way of knowing really. The writing on them is very, it's just imprinted on, so it's not really clear.
Speaking of the tap, the mistake I think I've made is not putting the water barrel high enough so that I can get a watering can in.
Totally, yeah. And make sure that the watering can sits nice and level so you don't have to lean on the tap. The time I've got one at home, which I can't quite do it without holding the watering can. I needed to have brought it forward just an inch more so that the watering can will sit and I can just stand there and wait for it to fill rather than having to hold it. The other thing that tends to happen is if you're using a rainwater diverter, which is one of these sections that you put into the downpipe, they've got a little weir in it so that the water will come into the water butt, and then when the water level is full, it should just draw the water straight back into the downpipe. So, it overflows into the downpipe again. And I do see them where people put them in above the water butt, thinking that it's got to run down. But then what happens is the water butt then overflows onto your path, and you get the whole of your roof water going everywhere in the winter.
Are there any particular sizes of water butt that anything advice, or is it just get one as many as you can and as big as you can?
I think it is as many as you can and as big as you can. The only other thing is to be wary of things falling in. I mean, bees, I've had bees in my water, but now what I do is I have just a stick, a twig, a piece of wood, anything floating in, and actually an old plastic flower pot will do it. It will just sit at the surface. So if the insects do end up in the water, then they've got a little platform they can get off of. A lid is obviously very convenient too, but I like to dip. I dip my watering can because it's so much quicker. So as long as you've got something in there where the wildlife can crawl back out again, then yeah.
So that's the only disadvantage of dipping tanks, is that you would have to make sure that nothing falls in.
Yes, that's right, yeah. I have seen people using cattle troughs, which is a nice idea because then you've got a nice big area that actually collects rain as well. And you can put a few plants in one end, and then the chances are that insects will end up being able to get out by crawling on the plants as well. So yeah, that's a good idea. And I think if you're going to put a lid, make sure it's a well-fitting one. I have heard of lids that spin when you put a pressure on one side of them, and then if something jumps on or an unsuspecting bird lands on it, then it goes straight down in because the lid spins.
And the other thing that you have said is that when you're watering your plants, people sometimes water them too much. They don't realise that actually the plants can survive with less water. So could you talk us through that?
Absolutely, yes. So plants are very good. They actually work like water pumps. They are putting water back into the atmosphere through their leaves. And when they are very wet, a lot of plants will actually increase the amount of water that they put into the atmosphere because they need the air in the water, in the soil, as much as they do the water. And so by drying the soil out a little bit, they're happier. And when the moisture levels then start to decrease, they can also detect this. So there's a lot of plant biochemistry going on, but they can detect when the soil moisture is reducing, and they respond to that by closing the little holes in their leaves called stomata, which is where they get their carbon dioxide from as well, but they're losing water vapour through those holes. So they close down those holes, which then reduces the amount of water that they're losing, which then means that they've preserved some of the soil moisture. So they only do that when the soil is quite dry. So if you keep constantly topping up with water, they will continue to use it at a higher rate. Whereas if you can manage to reduce the amount that you water each time, or extend the time in between watering, then you'll find that they will actually use less.
If we're actually thinking about how often we should water, with houseplants, we're always, poking in our fingers and finding out if it feels a bit damp. Should we be poking our fingers around our soil in our borders before thinking about watering?
Definitely, yes.
And also the other thing that's important there, isn't it, is right plant, right place.
Absolutely, yes. So if you've got a plant that likes to be in the shade and you try and grow it in the sun, then it's really going to struggle. And the only way you're going to keep it alive is to constantly water it. So, there's some great databases out. The RHS has got the Find a Plant database. There's plenty of others as well. Do read the instructions on the plants because there's lots of information about the conditions they like. Match up the conditions, or even go to the garden centre with your list of where you've got spaces and then look for plants that will fit that. It really does make a difference to how much water you'll end up needing.
And also there's quite a few plants which are specified as drought resilient once established. Now, how much watering should one do to get them established?
Now that's a really good question, which I probably can't answer it exactly. But if you think when you first plant that plant, you know exactly where the roots are because they were all in the pot. So that's where the roots start off from. And in an ideal world, you want to just make sure that there's enough moisture around that root ball to keep those roots growing downwards. I do much prefer to plant now in the autumn. So if you're going to plant hardy things that you know are going to do well through the winter anyway, then plant in the autumn when there's soil moisture around. And it's surprising how much root growth you'll get on the warm days through the winter. The roots will still continue to grow. And so by the time you get to spring, if we have a dry spring like we've had, you may find that those plants are much better established than if you'd planted them first thing in the spring.
So in fact, planting plants in the summer means you're going to use more water to get them established.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Grey water or old bath water or washing up water. Now, there seems to be quite a lot of debate around this because some people say, oh yes, put grey water on your plants, and some people say, oh no, it's unhygienic, it's going to have food particles in it. So what's your view on grey water?
Unfortunately, I think we're going to have to come to grey water. So, we've got a really warm day today. We've had a really dry spring, the driest spring for 69 years. We are going to have to look for other sources of water, and we've got to get our heads around how we manage grey water. There's an awful lot of water that doesn't hit the soap. Just showering with a bucket, the majority of what goes in the bucket doesn't actually have any soap in it. It's very minimal. And so, the water that comes from the shower before the water warms up, that's all good and no soap. And similar, if you're running the tap to get cold water for a drink, you've got slightly warm water that's going down the sink, still no soap. So there is a lot of water that we can use without the soap.
I'm also thinking about, food particles and things. If you've used something for washing up, now is that going to be a problem? Is it going to create rats, bacteria, etc.?
It's like soluble compost almost. If I'm washing vegetables that I've grown in the garden, you've got an odd bit of, debris of lettuce leaves or bits of soil that have come off the leaves. All of that is perfectly good to go back on the garden again. If it is food waste, you do need to be a little bit more careful. If you know that water might have raw meat juices in it, put it down the sink. After all, soil is the ultimate recycling machine that nature invented to clean up water. So if it's small amounts, and you're not going to eat that food that you've grown in that soil immediately, leave it for a few weeks. It should be fine.
And what do you think about drip irrigation systems? Is there anything anyone needs to think about with that?
Just think really carefully whether you really actually need them. Because we've just been talking about, we get the drought resilience by establishing plants. And so in theory, once they're established, we shouldn't really need the drip irrigation system unless you're constantly establishing plants. So maybe if you're only ever going to grow annuals, or you're only going to grow annual veg, a drip irrigation system could help, or under glass, obviously. But the other thing to be wary of is that they're not something that you just fit and forget about. You do need to manage them. They do leak, and you quite often get them where they've got lots of joints. So joints are favourites for blowing apart and leaking. So they can still go wrong, and you still need to manage them. And I would also suggest that you need to manage them depending on the weather as well. So you can waste an awful lot of water if the weather is cloudy and wet and you haven't adjusted your drip irrigation system.
In terms of actually watering plants efficiently, is there anything else that people need to think about?
Water deeply. So watering deeply and less frequently is probably better than putting a little bit on all the time. Whereas if you're growing in a greenhouse and you've got only little tiny pots, then you're going to have to water every day because they're going to dry out very quickly because they're only very shallow pots. So you need to just have a think about where are the roots likely to be. And if you've got a really big established tree, don't even bother, because the chances of you being able to put enough water on to reach into the depths of the roots of that tree, they're just not going to get there.
And of course, we have to say about lawns, don't we? You don't, in the UK, have to water your lawn in the drought. It just goes dormant. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. I think grass is an amazing plant because what it does is it sacrifices its top growth in order to save its roots. So yes, it will go brown, but it will bounce back again. And if it doesn't, then the chances are it's your soil that needed the improvement.
In some countries, people have to irrigate lawns in order to keep them, which probably means they shouldn't be having it. Whereas a lawn for us is really an extension of a meadow, really, isn't it?
Trying to grow a lawn in the desert, it just isn't going to work.
And speaking of the UK, we are about to face an awful lot more water shortages than we have had, aren't we?
Yesterday, the National Framework for Water Resources launched their report, and they have reported that by 2055, the England and Wales will be short of water by 6 billion litres per day. That's a huge amount. If you compare it to the amount of water that the whole of England and Wales use at the moment, it's about 14 billion. So we're short by a third, roughly.
Yeah.
We've all got to be really careful about what we use the water for, where we use it, and how we could reduce the amount. Just really think about it and talk about it to other people as well.
One thing that will really help your plants is if you plant them in the right place. We all understand that we've got a climate and we know what that is, but many of us don't realise that we've also got several microclimates in our gardens. And if we can make the most of those, then once again, you'll be doing less watering because, as Janet said, right plant, right place is the absolute best advice. So don't miss this video coming up next, which is about what is a microclimate and why does your garden need one? And thank you for watching. Goodbye.